The iron gate resisted. Eli braced his shoulder against the cold metal, his breath hitching as he pushed. With a long, agonizing screech of rusted hinges, the gate swung inward. The sound tore through the stagnant air of the basement, echoing off the concrete walls until it died into a hollow, suffocating silence. Dust motes danced in the single, thin shaft of light, piercing the gloom from above. Eli stepped inside, his boots scraping against the uneven floor. The air here was heavy, tasting of damp stone and forgotten time. He stood still, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness, listening to the settling of the building. Nothing moved. No draft stirred the stagnant atmosphere. He let the gate drop shut behind him, the final metallic thud vibrating through the soles of his feet. He was inside. The space felt smaller than he remembered, the walls pressing in with the weight of a decade spent in isolation. He did not look back at the exit. He turned his gaze toward the far corner, where the shadows pooled deepest, and took a slow, deliberate step forward into the stillness of his own private tomb. He moved toward the corner, his boots scraping against the cold, uneven concrete. His joints clicked with every step, a sharp, internal protest that he ignored. He reached down and retrieved a rusted tin cup from the floor. The metal was pitted and cold. He held it firmly, his grip calloused and steady. He tapped the rim against the damp wall 3 times. The sound was thin, metallic, and pathetic in the vast, suffocating quiet. He waited. Silence answered him, heavy and absolute. He did not flinch. He did not sigh. Pain flared in his knees as he lowered himself to the floor, a rhythmic, throbbing pulse that had become his only constant companion. He stared at the single, stagnant shaft of light filtering through the crack in the ceiling, watching the dust motes drift in the beam. His throat felt like dry, brittle parchment, a desert where words had long since withered. He hadn't spoken in years, and the effort to swallow was a sharp, rasping reminder of his own silence. He reached into his pocket, his fingers fumbling against the rough fabric until they found the object he kept hidden. He pulled out a frayed photograph. The edges were worn white, soft as felt from thousands of obsessive, repetitive touches. He held it up into the dim gray light. The faces in the picture were blurred, their features eroded by time and friction, yet the ghosts of their smiles remained. They were remnants of a life he once owned, a version of himself that had been capable of laughter and conversation. He traced the outline of a jawline, then a cheek, his thumb pressing hard against the paper until his skin turned white. The contrast was a physical ache, a sudden, sharp pressure behind his eyes that he refused to release. He did not cry. He simply stared until the faces began to swim in the gloom. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he turned his hand over. He placed the photograph face down on the cold concrete. Eli stood up, his knees popping with a dry, hollow sound that echoed against the basement walls. He did not rush. He walked to the far wall, his boots dragging slightly, leaving faint trails in the layer of fine dust covering the floor. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a jagged piece of metal, its edges sharp and rusted. He pressed the point against the stone surface. He began to carve. The metal bit into the rock with a harsh, grating screech that set his teeth on edge. He pushed hard, his knuckles turning pale under the pressure, guiding the shard in a steady, practiced motion. This was the 3,650th mark, a deep, permanent scar in the foundation of his prison. He traced the line once more, ensuring it was deep enough to last. He finished the stroke and pulled the metal away. He looked at the tally, a jagged row of history etched into the cold, unyielding stone. He opened his fingers, and the metal shard clattered to the floor. It was done. He stood there for a heartbeat, his posture slack. Eli turned away from the wall, his movements heavy and unhurried. He did not look back at the tally. He walked to the center of the room, his footsteps muffled by the thick, stagnant air. He lowered himself to the floor, joints stiffening as he settled into the familiar cold. He folded his arms across his chest, a final enclosure of his own space. He closed his eyes. Outside the basement, the world continued its relentless spin, oblivious to the man in the dark. Above ground, wind moved through trees, and tides pulled at the shore. But here, time had ceased its forward march. He remained motionless, a single, breathing anchor in a sea of absolute stillness. The silence was not empty. It was a weight, pressing against his skin, holding him in place. He was the only witness to the frozen seconds, the sole guardian of a life that had stopped moving. He did not wait for the light to shift. He simply existed, anchored in the quiet, as the world outside turned on without him.